Welcome back to English Unfiltered, the podcast where we explore real conversations in English. I'm Alex.
And I'm Jamie. And today we're diving into a trap that, honestly, I think almost every language learner falls into at some point.
Oh, totally. I want you to imagine this scenario for a second. You're sitting comfortably on your couch, the lights are dim, you've got a bowl of popcorn, and you are watching your absolute favorite English language movie.
Maybe a dramatic thriller or a romantic comedy.
Exactly. And you have the subtitles turned on. But you aren't just watching, you're actively studying.
Yeah.
You pause the scene, you rewind it.
Right.
You meticulously repeat the lines, trying to match the actor's exact tone, their perfect inflection, their flawless grammar, and you sit back and think, I've got this. I sound exactly like a Hollywood star. I am completely ready for the real world.
It is such a fantastic feeling of preparation. The vocabulary is locked in, the delivery is super smooth, and you just feel armored up to go out and speak.
But then you actually step out of your living room and into the messy real world. You walk into a crowded coffee shop, or you're hanging out with native English speakers at a loud restaurant. Yeah, the real test. Right. You step into a spontaneous conversation, and suddenly your brain just freezes.
Yep.
The rhythm is entirely foreign. People are talking over each other. They're trailing off halfway through a thought. They're throwing in these weird little filler words. And all those perfectly rehearsed movie lines, they suddenly feel completely useless.
It's a notoriously jarring experience. You go from feeling incredibly capable and fluent in that controlled environment of your living room to feeling like an absolute beginner the moment the script is thrown away.
It's so frustrating.
It really is. And the cruel irony is that it's not because you didn't study hard enough. It's because you spent all that time studying a completely artificial, heavily engineered version of human communication.
Which is exactly what we're unpacking today. Our mission is to explore why this specific trap, relying way too heavily on Hollywood scripts, can actually make you sound totally unnatural in the real world.
Yeah, we're going to look at the underlying mechanics of spontaneous speech, the psychology of human connection, and how shifting your expectations away from that movie perfection can finally unlock genuine, comfortable fluency.
So before we get too deep into this, we should probably clarify that movies and TV shows are still incredibly valuable tools.
Oh, absolutely. Don't cancel your streaming subscriptions. They train your ear to the phonetics of English. They introduce cultural idioms, and, they provide a massive volume of listening practice.
Right, but the danger lies in treating them as a documentary of human interaction. They set wildly unrealistic expectations for how communication actually works.
Think about the foundational rules of movie conversations versus real ones. We really have to view this through the lens of production economics. Like, screen time is incredibly expensive.
Oh, sure. A director has, maybe 2 hours?
Yeah, 2 hours to introduce a dozen characters, establish a complex world, set up a massive conflict, and resolve the whole thing.
That's a lot of ground to cover.
Exactly. And because of that economic pressure, movie dialogue has to be hyper-efficient. It's structured, dramatic, and entirely direct. Every single sentence has to justify its existence on the page.
So every utterance usually serves a dual, if not triple, purpose.
Right. It's advancing the plot, or revealing a hidden character motivation, or perfectly setting up the punchline of a joke. And because of this, characters speak in complete, grammatically flawless sentences.
And they respond instantly.
Yes. They respond to each other immediately without any cognitive processing time. Almost everything they say carries significant narrative weight.
When I think about trying to deploy that kind of highly engineered movie English in a real-life setting, I keep coming back to this analogy of a highly choreographed dance routine.
Oh, I like that.
Like, let's say you spend 6 months learning the most beautiful, complex, passionate Argentine tango.
Yeah.
You master every intricate step, every dramatic pause. It's stunning art.
Right.
But if you try to use that exact tango routine to just walk down the street to the grocery store to buy milk, you are going to look completely ridiculous.
You'd look insane.
Exactly. It's a beautiful dance, but it's a highly inefficient, socially bizarre way to walk down the sidewalk.
That visual captures the disconnect perfectly. You are salsa dancing down the produce aisle while everyone else is just casually pushing their shopping carts. Real life is just pushing the cart.
It's pushing the cart, yeah.
Everyday communication is fundamentally defined by its messiness and its utility. It is full of hesitation. It features awkward pauses, interruptions, and people completely abandoning their sentence halfway through because, they thought of something else. We speak in fragments, not paragraphs.
But let's push on this idea a little bit, because I think this is where the logic gets tricky for a learner. If movies are essentially the perfected, polished version of language like, the ideal grammatical state, why does trying to speak perfectly actually hinder our ability to communicate?
That's a great question.
Shouldn't a perfect, highly efficient data transfer make us easier to understand?
Well, that assumes that the primary purpose of language is merely the transfer of raw data from my brain to your brain. If we were computers, then yes, perfect, structured, uninterrupted data packets movie English would be the optimal method.
But we're not computers.
Right. Human language is primarily a tool for social grooming. It's a mechanism for building emotional rapport and signaling safety. When you strip away all the messiness, the slight corrections, the hesitations, the vulnerability of thinking out loud, you basically strip away the humanity of the interaction.
So it triggers a subconscious alarm for the listener. It feels unnatural.
Uncanny, even. Like when someone speaks to you in perfectly formed, highly structured, unbroken paragraphs, it triggers a defensive response in your brain. The speaker seems robotic or overly rehearsed.
Almost like a politician giving a press conference rather than a colleague having a chat.
Exactly. That lack of spontaneous messiness creates a psychological wall. The listener subconsciously processes the interaction not as a shared dialogue, but as a monologue being delivered at them. They feel managed rather than spoken to.
Oh yeah, that makes so much sense. So if overly perfect speech creates that uncanny valley feeling, what does that actually sound like in practice? Let's look at an example to ground this in actual vocabulary.
Is it?
Imagine a scenario where a coworker comes up to you and starts venting about a massive problem they're having with the project.
Yeah.
They're super stressed out, looking for support. If we were writing a Hollywood script, the main character might look them dead in the eye and say, "I completely understand your situation, and I believe we should take immediate action."
Which sounds like the climax of a corporate legal thriller. It carries so much dramatic weight.
Exactly. "I completely understand your situation, and I believe we should take immediate action." Now contrast that with how an actual supportive native speaker would communicate that exact same sentiment in reality.
Mhm.
It would sound much more like, "Yeah, I get it. Maybe we should do something about it."
The contrast is staggering, isn't it? Yeah, I get it. Maybe we should do something about it. It is vastly simpler. It utilizes softer verbs. It's casual. And most importantly, it leaves room for the other person to breathe.
I want to play devil's advocate here, though,
Go for it.
because I can hear language learners mentally protesting right now. If I am learning a second language, isn't it inherently safer to aim for that perfect, formal sentence structure just in case?
I see where you're going.
I think of it like wearing a tuxedo to a casual party. If you get invited to a backyard barbecue and you show up in a full, tailored tuxedo, you might be completely overdressed.
Yeah.
But hey, at least you aren't the guy who showed up underdressed in dirty sweatpants.
That's true.
So isn't it better to use the formal movie English so you never accidentally sound uneducated or too informal?
I completely understand that instinct. It's totally rooted in a fear of being judged for making a mistake. But if we follow your tuxedo analogy through to its logical conclusion, it reveals exactly why that defensive strategy fails in social dynamics.
How so?
Think about the sociology of that backyard barbecue. You show up in a tuxedo while everyone else is in jeans, holding paper plates of potato salad. Yes, by the technical standards of high fashion, you are dressed flawlessly. But how do your clothes make the other people at the party feel?
Well, if I show up in a tux, I'm probably making everyone else feel incredibly uncomfortable.
Right.
They suddenly feel underdressed or they feel like I'm judging their casual clothes. It just makes things stiff.
Exactly. You haven't just overdressed, you have introduced a bizarre power dynamic into a relaxed setting. You've created a hierarchy and a barrier to intimacy. And the exact same sociological phenomenon happens with language.
So by speaking perfectly, I'm verbally wearing a tuxedo.
Yes. If you walk up to a stressed colleague who's casually sipping coffee and you drop a heavy formal sentence like, "I completely understand your situation and I believe we should take immediate action," you create an immediate sense of distance.
You aren't building rapport, you're alienating them.
Exactly. The simpler, flexible phrases like, "Yeah, I get it," they match the emotional wardrobe of the room. They show empathy precisely because they lower the stakes. They are casual, low pressure, and highly connective.
That totally flips the script on what correct English actually is. By trying to execute perfect grammar, you're fundamentally failing at the primary goal of the conversation, which is connecting with a human being standing in front of you.
Precisely. And a massive component of that messy, casual connection relies on a linguistic tool that movies almost entirely edit out in post-production. Filler words.
Oh, the dreaded filler words. Every public speaking coach's worst nightmare.
Right. We're talking about words like, oh, like, and I mean. In strict language classrooms, learners are aggressively taught that these are errors. They lose points on exams for using them.
And in movies, you almost never hear them unless a director is using them as a specific character flaw. Like to show a character is hiding a dark secret, lying, or hopelessly socially awkward.
Right. If the suave action hero suddenly says, ah, the audience immediately knows he's the traitor.
Totally.
But in the reality of everyday communication, native speakers deploy these filler words constantly, and they are not respates. Linguistically, they function as essential cognitive signposts and traffic signals.
Traffic signals.
Yeah, they manage the flow of the interaction. When I insert into the middle of a complex thought, I'm not stumbling. I am actively throwing out a little ping, checking in with you to see if you are still following my logic.
Oh, that makes sense.
And when I say or I mean, I'm putting up a yield sign, I am signaling to you, hey, my brain is working on retrieving the next word. Please don't interrupt me. I still own the conversational floor.
They are literally the social glue that holds spontaneous, unscripted thought together. So if your entire model of English comes from Hollywood, where these crucial traffic signals are scrubbed clean, you end up speaking in a way that feels incredibly rigid.
Exactly. You lack the actual tools required to show someone you're thinking, to soften a harsh statement, or to check for mutual understanding.
You're driving on a highway without using any turn signals, basically.
Perfect analogy. And that brings us to another massive difference. So we're stripping away the verbal tuxedo and throwing in these linguistic traffic signals. But there's something else that isn't about the words at all. It's about the physical space and time between the words.
The pacing of human interaction.
Yes. This is where learners feel the most intense pressure. We're talking about the imperfect pause.
In cinema, dead air is the ultimate enemy. I mean, unless a director is filming a highly dramatic slow-motion standoff in a Western where two cowboys are staring each other down, all the dead space is brutally cut in the editing room.
Brutally cut. Characters fire complex lines back and forth with zero processing time. Character A finishes their emotionally devastating sentence, and a microsecond later, Character B delivers a witty, perfectly crafted, grammatical response.
It's exhilarating to watch, but it creates this deeply ingrained, toxic belief for language learners that true fluency equals speed and instant response.
Absolutely.
I like to think about conversational pauses using the analogy of typography. Like the white space on a printed page. Imagine opening a dense novel, and the designer has removed all the margins, all the paragraph breaks, and all the spaces between the lines.
Oh, that sounds awful.
It would be a terrifying, overwhelming wall of text. The entire page is just a solid black block of ink. You literally wouldn't be able to read it because your eyes need the white space to group the letters into recognizable shapes.
Your eyes need the breaks just to navigate the data.
Exactly. And without pauses, a verbal conversation is just an overwhelming, stressful wall of sound. The white space on a page is what allows your visual cortex to process the letters. The pauses in a conversation are the white space of audio. Without them, the listener's brain simply cannot digest what you just said.
That is a brilliant way to map the cognitive science of listening. Pauses are not just a stylistic choice, they are a biological necessity for auditory processing.
Right.
When you speak, the listener's brain is working incredibly hard. In a fraction of a second, they have to decode your phonetic sounds into words, parse those words into syntax, and translate that syntax into meaningful concepts.
That's a ton of heavy lifting.
It is, and it requires milliseconds of silence. It requires an acoustic buffer. At the same time, the speaker needs that microsecond to formulate their next thought. If you try to speak without pauses, desperately mimicking a fast-paced movie character, you are actually flooding the listener's cognitive buffer. You make it significantly harder for a native speaker to understand you.
I'm struggling with a paradox here, though. Let's talk about the psychological side of this for the learner.
Okay.
If I grant myself permission to pause awkwardly, or if I intentionally use filler words like, my brain is screaming at me that I'm failing. I feel like I'm signaling that I have a poor vocabulary, that I'm uneducated. How does leaning into those mistakes and that messiness actually generate confidence?
It feels completely counterintuitive, doesn't it? But we have to look at how your brain allocates resources. your cognitive RAM, so to speak. When you are desperately trying to speak movie English, 100% of your cognitive RAM is dedicated to internal translation and grammatical perfection.
Yeah, you're just focused on the rules.
Right. You are so stressed about not making a mistake that you aren't actually present in the conversation at all. You aren't genuinely listening to the other person. You are just waiting in a state of high anxiety for your turn to perform your perfectly constructed, rehearsed sentence.
Oh, that is painfully relatable.
Yeah.
You are just internally rehearsing your next line while staring blankly at them as they talk.
We have all been trapped in that cycle. But when you grant yourself permission to pause, say, to use a simple phrase like, yeah, I get it, instead of a formal monologue, you suddenly free up a massive amount of that mental RAM.
You remove the pressure of the theatrical performance.
Exactly. Because you aren't burning all your energy on perfection, you can actually relax, listen to the person in front of you, and respond naturally to their emotional vibe.
So confidence isn't the absence of mistakes.
Not at all. In linguistics, there's a concept called repair. True fluency and conversational confidence come from the ability to navigate the messy, unpredictable flow of an interaction, make a mistake, repair it live with a you know or an I mean, and keep the social connection intact. Knowing you can handle the mess is what actually makes you confident.
That reframing is incredibly freeing. The ultimate takeaway isn't to stop watching movies. Keep your streaming subscriptions. Enjoy the brilliant acting. Soak up the vast vocabulary. But do it with the conscious recognition of what you are consuming.
Right. Scripted, highly edited drama.
It is an art form designed for entertainment. It is not an instructional manual for real life.
Genuine fluency lives in the hesitations. It lives in the is, the you knows, and the moments you have to completely stop and restart a sentence because your brain went blank. It lives in the beautiful, vulnerable imperfection of everyday, spontaneous human connection.
Absolutely. By shifting your focus away from Hollywood and paying close attention to how native speakers actually communicate on the street or in a casual office meeting, you will experience a profound boost in your ability to connect naturally.
The shift from movie English to real English isn't about dumbing down your vocabulary. It is about making your language human again, prioritizing connection over perfection.
Human. That is the perfect word for it. And, as we talk about the messiness that makes language uniquely human, it raises a really provocative question about where our communication is heading next in the modern world.
Oh, it really does. If we step back and connect this to the broader technological landscape, think about the explosion of artificial intelligence we are currently living through. If pauses, hesitations, live repairs, and filler words are exactly the traits that make us sound natural, emotionally relatable, and fundamentally human, what is going to happen to human connection as we increasingly spend our days interacting with AI-generated text and hyper-advanced voice assistants?
It is a fascinating collision of ideas.
Think about it. The default state for these AI voice models is to speak with the exact same flawless, uninterrupted grammatical perfection as a Hollywood movie script. A machine doesn't need a cognitive buffer to process phonemes. It doesn't need to say, to hold the conversational floor while it retrieves a word from its memory bank.
It's the ultimate terrifying embodiment of movie English.
Exactly. So if we are telling language learners today that flawless perfection creates a cold, uncanny barrier to intimacy, what happens to our society when we spend half our waking hours talking to perfectly speaking machines? Will that perfection alienate us?
That's a deep question.
Or, even more bizarrely, will we eventually have to program computers to intentionally stutter, to hesitate, to throw in a random, just to trick our brains into feeling comfortable talking to them? Will we literally have to teach machines how to be beautifully flawed?
Will we have to teach algorithms how to say, That is a wild, slightly unsettling thought that is absolutely going to keep me up tonight.
Me too.
But it's a brilliant question to leave you all with today. As you go out into the world, pay closer attention not just to the words people are saying, but to how delightfully messy the delivery is. Listen for the pauses. Notice the is. Recognize them as the social glue of humanity and give yourself the grace to be a little messy too.
Perfectly said.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We invite you to keep listening, keep learning, and keep exploring the wonderful, messy reality of the world around you. We'll catch you on the next episode of English Unfiltered.
See you next time.